You're being told to relax. The news is saying the worst is over, but they're all missing the one thing that's about to make prices explode. For the last year, a handful of giant companies have been hiding the real inflation from you, and the dam is about to break. In this video, I'm going to show you the proof and explain what happens when they finally decide to pass the bill to you. You've seen the headlines and you've heard the speeches. Inflation is supposedly cooling. The Federal Reserve, after a long and brutal campaign of rate hikes, has started to ease up. They cut rates in September of 2025 and then did it again in October, bringing the benchmark rate down to a range of 3.75% to 4.00%. There's even talk of more cuts to come. On the surface, this is the news we've all been waiting for. It feels like we can finally take a breath. It suggests the economic war is over and that your wallet can come out of the bunker. The official numbers seem to back this up. Headline inflation has been hovering around 3%, a far cry from the terrifying peaks that defined the post-pandemic economy. But let me ask you a question. Does it feel like the war is over? When you walk through the grocery store or pay your bills, does it feel like things are getting cheaper? Or does it feel more like the quiet between lightning and thunder, that unsettling calm before the real storm hits? This feeling, this disconnect between the official story and your daily reality isn't just in your head. It's the first sign of a much bigger economic illusion. Because the story the headlines are telling you is a lie. Not a lie of fabrication, but a lie of omission. It's a story that conveniently leaves out the single most important actor in this entire drama, the corporations that sell you everything you buy. What they don't tell you is that while you were feeling the pain, these companies were on the front lines, fighting a much bigger battle against their own costs. They've been acting as a giant dam, holding back a tidal wave of real, terrifying inflation. But that dam is cracking. And if it breaks, the prices we've seen so far will look like a gentle stream. What's coming is a flood. To understand the scale of this illusion, you first have to understand the official narrative. It's a simple, comforting story. The Fed saw inflation running wild, so it did its job. It raised interest rates, which makes borrowing money more expensive. This cools down the economy, slows spending, and eventually brings prices back under control. Now, with the job market showing signs of weakness, the Fed is cautiously cutting rates to try and avoid a deep recession. It's the classic soft landing scenario everyone hopes for. But here's the first part of the lie. When you hear that inflation is cooling, what does your brain translate that to? Most of us think it means prices are going down, but that's not what it means at all. Think of it like this. You're in a car speeding towards a cliff at 100 miles per hour. The driver slams on the brakes and the car screeches down to 20 miles per hour. Are you safer? Well, you're not accelerating as fast, but you are still hurtling towards the exact same cliff. You haven't turned around. You haven't even stopped. That is the difference between disinflation and deflation. What we've been experiencing is disinflation. Prices are still going up, just at a slower rate. They are not falling. The price of your groceries, your gas, your insurance, they are all still on an upward path. The car is still moving towards the cliff. The relief you're supposed to feel is based on the idea that you're just crashing in slow motion. This fundamental misunderstanding is the bedrock of the entire inflation lie. The government and the media celebrate a lower inflation number as a victory. In a technical sense, it is, but for the average person, it's a hollow victory. Your budget doesn't care about the rate of change, it cares about the absolute numbers. And those numbers are still going up month after month, relentlessly grinding away at your purchasing power. A 3% inflation rate on top of a 9% inflation rate doesn't cancel anything out. It compounds. It makes the hole you're in even deeper. The celebration of cooling inflation is a masterpiece of misdirection. It makes you feel like the problem is solved when, in reality, the fundamental conditions that drive prices are about to get a lot worse. While we're all distracted by the speedometer, we're ignoring the fact that the engine is on fire and the brakes are about to fail. This brings us back to that feeling you have, that sense of frustration when the numbers don't match your life. The news says inflation is down, but you just paid 25% more for groceries than you did a few years ago, and that price hasn't budged downwards. Why? Part of the answer is that companies have already been passing on costs, but in ways designed to trick you. This is the first layer of the deception, the one you can see if you look closely. It's the dark arts of corporate pricing, designed to protect profit margins without spooking you with an obvious price hike. The most famous of these is shrinkflation. The price on the sticker stays the same, but the product inside the package gets smaller. Your favorite bag of chips suddenly has more air at the top. Your roll of paper towels has fewer sheets. Technically, the list price hasn't increased, but the price per unit, per chip, per ounce, per sheet has skyrocketed. You're paying the same for less. Then there's skimpflation, which is even more insidious. The size and the price stay the same, but the company secretly substitutes cheaper, lower quality ingredients. Your favorite ice cream that used to be made with real cream is now made with cheaper fillers. The airline you fly has reduced its legroom and stopped offering free snacks. You are paying the same price or even more for a demonstrably worse product or experience. These tactics are a form of hidden inflation. They are tricky to fully capture in the headline Consumer Price Index or CPI. Government statisticians do try to adjust for changes in quality or quantity, but it's an incredibly difficult task to do perfectly. A bag of chips is still tracked as a bag of chips, even if it's half empty. This is why you feel like you're being ripped off, because you are. You're being given less, or you're being given worse, for the same amount of money. This isn't an accident, it's a deliberate corporate strategy to protect profits. It validates that nagging suspicion that you're not crazy for feeling poorer, even when the experts on TV tell you things are getting better. But here's the terrifying truth: shrinkflation and skimpflation are just the opening act. They are the tools companies use when they're trying to be subtle. The cost pressures building up behind the scenes are now so immense that subtlety is no longer an option. They're about to stop using a scalpel and start using a sledgehammer. So, if companies have been facing these massive costs, why haven't we seen prices for everything just double or triple already? Why the elaborate dance of shrinkflation and skimpflation? The answer is that for the past year or more, corporate America has been acting as a giant shock absorber. They have built a temporary wall between their soaring costs and your wallet. They have been intentionally taking a hit, absorbing billions of dollars in new expenses without passing the full amount on to you. A July 2025 report, for example, noted that firms like GM and Nike were absorbing most tariff costs rather than immediately passing them to consumers. Now, this isn't because they're being generous, it's all for cold, hard, strategic reasons. First is the fear of losing market share. In a hyper competitive economy, nobody wants to be the first to announce a major price hike. Imagine two competing coffee brands. Both of their costs go up 20%. If brand A raises its price by 20% and brand B only raises its price by 5%, what happens? Consumers flock to brand B. Companies are locked in a game of chicken, each one waiting for the other to flinch first. Second, many companies were hoping these cost increases were temporary. They thought the supply chain snarls would resolve and that the sweeping new tariffs imposed in 2025 might be negotiated away. Why alienate your entire customer base with a huge price increase if the underlying cost might just go back down in 6 months? It seemed better to take a temporary hit to profits and ride out the storm. Third, it's about protecting brand loyalty. Decades of marketing have gone into convincing you that a certain brand represents a certain value. A sudden jarring price increase shatters that perception. It feels like a betrayal. Instead of a 20% sticker shock, they opted for a quiet death by 1,000 cuts. A little shrinkflation, a little skimpflation, and a big hit to their own bottom line, all to keep you from walking away. For a time, this strategy worked, but it also had an unintended consequence. It has artificially suppressed the true rate of inflation. The prices you see today don't reflect the true cost of getting those items onto the shelf. They are a fantasy subsidized by corporate profit margins. This is the ticking time bomb. The dam is holding, but the water level behind it is rising at an alarming rate. To truly grasp the danger, you need to see what's happening behind that dam. Let's start with tariffs. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell himself has been blunt, stating that the effects of tariffs are becoming visible and that price increases are expected to accumulate. One analysis from Yale in October 2025 estimated that consumers are facing an average effective tariff rate of 17.9%, the highest since 1934, and projected this could lead to a 1.3% rise in the overall price level, equivalent to an income loss of about $1,800 for the average household. But here's the key: that analysis assumed a full pass through of tariffs to consumers. Other reports confirm this hasn't happened yet, or at least not completely. The pass through has been delayed and uneven. For example, reports showed General Motors paid a staggering sum in tariffs but delayed broad price hikes. Stellantis took a reported $350 million profit hit. These are not small numbers. This is a massive tax on business that, for the most part, has not yet shown up on price tags. It's a coiled spring of inflationary pressure. Next, look at the difference between two key metrics: the Consumer Price Index, which measures prices you pay, and the Producer Price Index, PPI, which measures the prices companies pay. The PPI is a crystal ball for the CPI. When the cost of steel, plastic, wheat, and shipping goes up for producers, it's a mathematical certainty that the cost of cars, toys, and bread will eventually go up for you. There's just a lag. And we're living in that lag right now. While you hear about cooling consumer inflation, producer prices have been telling a much scarier story. Even as some input costs have come down from their peaks, they remain significantly elevated. For a company, the cost of raw materials is up, the cost of energy is up, the cost of shipping is up. And now, thanks to tariffs, the cost of importing goods has exploded. This isn't just one or two sectors, it's everywhere. Companies that make everything from furniture to coffee have been hit. They've been fighting a multi front war against costs. For the last year, they've been hiding their casualties from you. How can we be so sure this cost absorption is happening? Because we have the receipts, corporate profit margins. A profit margin is simply the percentage of revenue a company keeps after all costs are paid. If a company has revenue of $100 and costs of $80, its profit is $20 and its margin is 20%. Now, think about what happens when a company's costs for materials, shipping, tariffs go up dramatically. If it's afraid to lose customers, it holds the line on prices. Revenue stays at $100, but costs might climb from $80 to $90 or even $95. Suddenly, the profit plummets to $10 or $5. The profit margin gets squeezed. This is exactly what has been happening under the surface. Many retailers and manufacturers have been facing a brutal margin compression. The Wall Street Journal reported that Stellantis, the parent company of Chrysler, took a $350 million profit hit specifically because of tariffs. Even companies that try to pass on costs are finding it difficult. When Procter and Gamble raised prices significantly, it saw its sales volume drop as consumers started to say no. This sent a chilling message to every other CEO. There is a limit to how much you can raise prices before you start destroying your own business. So they are caught in a vice. On one side, rising costs. On the other, a consumer who is financially stressed and resistant to price hikes. The only thing that can give is the company's own profitability, and that's the fuse on the time bomb. For months, they have allowed this fuse to burn, hoping it would be diffused, that tariffs would be rolled back or shipping costs would collapse. But it's still burning, and every financial quarter, it gets shorter. The question is no longer if the bomb will go off. The only question is when. A dam can only hold back so much water, and a company can only absorb rising costs for so long. We are now entering the phase where the forces holding this fragile system together are about to fail. There are three primary triggers that could cause the floodgates to open. The first is margin collapse. A business can't operate at a loss forever. When the choice becomes either raise prices or go out of business, the choice is simple. Survival trumps strategy. Small businesses surveyed in late 2025 warned that while they'd try to absorb costs through the holidays, they would likely be forced to raise prices in January 2026. What begins with the smallest businesses will inevitably cascade upwards. The second trigger is competitor action. Remember that game of chicken? It only lasts until someone blinks. The moment one major player in an industry announces a significant price increase, the game is over. In fact, that company has just done all its competitors a massive favor. It has broken the seal. It gives them the cover to do the exact same thing. You'll see it happen with breathtaking speed. One airline announces a fuel surcharge, and within 48 hours, they all have one. The first company takes the heat, but it normalizes the price increase for the whole industry. The third trigger is a subtle but powerful shift in consumer psychology. As the Fed cuts rates to support a weakening job market, it sends a signal. It tells companies that the central bank's primary concern may be shifting from inflation back to employment. This creates a permission structure for companies to finally let go. Ironically, the very rate cuts meant to provide you with relief may be the final signal corporations need to unleash the price hikes they've been holding back. When these triggers are pulled, what happens next may not feel like the inflation we've experienced before. The slow, grinding increase could be replaced by a price catch-up phenomenon. It could feel like an explosion. Understand this critical point. Companies may not just raise prices to cover their current increased costs. They might try to raise them to cover all the costs they've already absorbed. They will likely attempt to reclaim the profit margin they sacrificed while holding the dam. If a company's costs went up 20%, but they only raised your price by 5%, there is a 15% deficit that's been accumulating. When the dam breaks, they won't just raise prices by another 2%. They could implement a sudden, shocking increase that attempts to close that entire 15% gap in one go. This is why the title is The Inflation Lie. The lie wasn't just that inflation was low, it was that the prices you were paying had any connection to reality. We have been living in an economy subsidized by corporate profit margins. The end of that subsidy may be at hand. What would this explosion look like? It could mean the price of milk doesn't go up by 10 cents, but by $1 overnight. It could mean your subscription service fee doesn't increase by $1, but by $5. We've already seen previews of this. Smucker's reportedly raised its coffee prices multiple times to offset costs and new tariffs. Imagine this happening across every industry. It will feel like every company you do business with has conspired to raise prices at the same time. This would be a brutal shock to millions of households. Budgets that are already strained could shatter. The feeling of just barely getting by could be replaced by the feeling of actively falling behind. The most concerning part of this scenario is who can't easily save you: the Federal Reserve. In a normal cycle, if inflation runs hot because everyone is spending like crazy, the Fed raises interest rates to cool things down. But the potential price explosion we're talking about is not demand pull inflation, it's cost push inflation. The costs are already baked into the system. Raising interest rates now would be like trying to unswallow something that's already been eaten. It's too late. In fact, the Fed is in a bind. Their dual mandate, controlling inflation and maximizing employment, is in direct conflict. They are cutting rates because the labor market is weak, but stimulating the economy right when companies might be unleashing a wave of catch up price hikes is a potential policy trap. The Fed is a battleship, not a speedboat. It can't turn on a dime. By the time their data shows a price explosion in the CPI numbers, it would be months too late. The price hikes will have already happened. This is the trap. The Fed is looking in the rearview mirror at last month's employment data, while a potential tidal wave of corporate cost pass through is about to hit the windshield. Its tools are designed for a different kind of problem. The Fed can influence how much you borrow, but it can't repeal a tariff or force a company to operate at a loss forever. We are, in essence, on our own. So, let's recap the lie. The official story is that inflation is cooling and the worst is behind us. The truth is that the inflation you felt so far has been an artificially suppressed version of reality. For over a year, companies have been absorbing a massive wave of hidden costs, creating a temporary wall between their expenses and your wallet. The official story is that the Fed is in control. The truth is that the dam shows signs of breaking. Squeezed profit margins and strategic shifts are creating a breaking point. If it arrives, it may not be a gentle rise in prices. It could be a violent, sudden price catch up as companies rush to pass on more than a year's worth of accumulated costs. And the Federal Reserve, the one institution meant to protect us, is not only in a difficult position to stop it, but its current actions could inadvertently make it worse. The purpose of this is not to scare you, but to prepare you. It's to show you the real mechanics of what's happening to your money beyond the headlines. The feeling that your money doesn't go as far as it used to is not just a feeling. It's the shadow of a much larger event, and now you know why it might be coming. If you want more unfiltered analysis like this to understand what's really happening with the economy, make sure you subscribe. We break down the stories that happen behind the headlines. And now I have a question for you. Where have you already seen the cracks in the dam? Which product have you noticed that has held its price steady, even though you know deep down the company's costs must have gone up? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of them, and your real world examples are the best proof of what we've talked about today. Thanks for watching.